name is Christian Dooley, and I will be presenting on the topic of biodiversity. Our world has experienced 5 mass extinctions. The causes behind these mass extinctions are habitat loss, volcanic rain, meteors, amongst other reasons. There was a period of time when over 50% of Earth's species no longer remained. Though these events occurred far before any of us or our triple great-grandparents were born, the danger of these events haven't disappeared. In fact, we are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, the primary cause of which being human behaviors. These human behaviors, such as deforestation caused by logging, are destroying habitats and harming biodiversity. In this presentation, I will first go over basic facts and definitions, and then take an in-depth look at biodiversity and its applications. Finally, I will close with future actions and a summary of the major points discussed. Biodiversity is broad in its definition and can be restated as biological variety. It can be broken down into several levels, including genetic diversity and chemical diversity. A particularly important subdivision of biodiversity is ecosystem diversity, which is defined as the number of different ecosystems on Earth or in a geographical area. Ecosystems are very complex systems with connected interactions. Changes in the environment could alter these interactions. This infers that the harm done to ecosystems will damage the systems present in that ecosystem, possibly leading to the elimination of the complex interactions if the harm is serious enough. Measuring biodiversity is a very complicated process, as the definition of it is very broad and can be broken down into several levels. For instance, a conservation geneticist can study the diversity of genes within a population. However, an ecologist may instead choose to study the diversity of species within an ecosystem. Therefore, the method used to study biodiversity depends on the diversity level itself being studied. However, part of studying biodiversity also involves measuring extinction rates, as the field of conservation biology seeks to know these rates in order to maintain or improve biodiversity. One of these methods used to measure extinction rates is to correlate species loss and habitat loss. Another part of studying biodiversity is quantifying the individuals within a given area. Several methods can be used to achieve this. The first is called a census, which involves setting up lines or quadrats and counting the individuals within them. This is great for quantifying plants or very small organisms, but isn't very effective when trying to quantify animals. For these creatures, the mark recapture method is much more effective. This method involves trapping and collecting animals and marking them. That way, these scientists can return to the area and quantify how many of the marked remain from the previous capture. These methods are used in conservation biology, an applied science that focuses on protecting the Earth's biodiversity and maintaining natural ecosystems. This field focuses mainly on answering 3 questions. How is the diversity of life distributed around the planet? What threats does this diversity face? What can people do to reduce or eliminate these threats and, when possible, restore biological diversity and ecosystem health? The first 2 questions can be understood by scientific methods. However, the last question requires an understanding of human behavior and how to modify it. This means that individuals from multiple disciplines must collaborate in order to protect and restore biodiversity. Some of the behaviors observed in human-dominated landscapes that cause harm to ecosystems and biodiversity are deforestation, overfishing, oil spills, and more. Deforestation has been exceptionally damaging to ecosystems, and the most concerning example would be the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest. The region hosts an estimated 47 million people, which includes many groups and indigenous peoples. A decent percentage of various forms of wildlife depend on the Amazon rainforest for their survival. Demand for wood has led loggers to target the Amazon rainforest, which has a large supply of the raw material. 17% of the Amazon rainforest has been wholly lost, and the data from the first half of 2022 show that this loss is continuing to grow. Deforestation has removed tree canopies that create humid air that protects the forest, leading to drought. This drought kills the trees, making the deforested region susceptible to wildfires. These wildfires has caused part of the Amazon rainforest to flip from being a carbon sink to a carbon source. This harms biodiversity directly and indirectly. This harms biodiversity directly in that organisms that depend on the ecosystem can no longer depend on it because the trees that have been removed or burned in wildfires. This harms biodiversity indirectly in that it worsens the positive feedback loop of climate change, and that wildfires send CO2 into the atmosphere, which increases temperatures, which increases the likelihood of forests catching fire, which causes more wildfires, so on and so forth. Left unmitigated, the Amazon will continue to be deforested until no rainforest remains. Though Brazil, through the PPCDAM, and the UN, through the UNFCCC, have put forth successful efforts to decrease deforestation in Brazil, additional regulations and procedures can be used to decrease deforestation in the region and throughout the world. Part of the future of protecting biodiversity would involve innovations in the field of conservation biology. Conservation biologists should pair with business leaders and government agencies to work towards a feasible solution to these problems that protect the environment while minimizing costs and inefficient processes. I have a suggestion in particular to the issue of the Amazon rainforest while protecting against illegal wood harvesting. My suggestion requires the establishment of systems that are effective at identifying lumber that at a minimum has been harvested legally. Though later amendments could include a sustainability requirement once sufficient research has been conducted to make the change feasible for all businesses. This would mean that the amount of documentation through the supply chain would increase, as certifying organizations would have to report on the following information: the supplier used by the company selling the finished goods, where that supplier obtained the raw materials from, when the supplier obtained the raw materials, what date the raw materials were harvested, how the raw materials were harvested, and what internal controls were present in the supplier's policies to ensure that the raw materials were harvested in accordance with the applicable laws, regulations, and standards. Suppliers should also be subject to the same legal scrutiny as a public company's financial statements are by the SEC. Though this would increase costs in the short term, the long-term benefits of preventing deforestation are preferable, especially when considering the ethical implications of the destruction of land inhabited by indigenous peoples. This is one way that we can protect biodiversity. Another way to protect biodiversity is to emphasize its importance within the education system throughout a child's 1st through 12th grade education. This can be done by integrating the subject into each science class the student takes. Though some courses might be more difficult to integrate this topic into, the material will become more progressively complex throughout each grade level. Covering this topic within each grade level will aid in solidifying its importance in the minds of the next generation. As this generation reaches voting age, they are more likely to vote for politicians who are friendlier in their approach towards environmental policy that seeks to protect and improve biodiversity. In closing, biodiversity can be broadly defined as biological variety. There are several methods involved in the study of biodiversity, including estimated extinction rates and quantifying individuals in a specified region. These methods are used by conservation biologists who seek to protect and improve biodiversity by studying species diversity, the threats against it, and how human behavior harms it. Various human behaviors are causing substantial damage to biodiversity, one of which is deforestation. Deforestation in the Amazon rainforests has led to a loss in biodiversity, and parts of the forests are turning into carbon sources. Deforestation can be combated by additional regulation, stricter standards, and integrating biodiversity education throughout the 1st and 12th grade levels. So these are all the sources that I used. There's a decent list that cite the photos used in this presentation. Thank you for watching, and have a great holiday season. Thank you.